One of the more daunting aspects of model building is choosing paint. And as you can see in front of me, there is a plethora of paint available now for model makers. When I started out in the 60s, we had Testors, Pactra, and Humbrol. We had 3 paints, and they were all enamel paints, and that was it. So it was easy to choose what kind of paint you were going to use. We're going to take a look at paint. I'm not going to get too detailed about paint composition and chemistry. That we can do that later in another video. What I'm going to do is basically show you some of the basic information, or give you some basics that you'll need to go in and choose what you need to paint a model. So let's get to it and check out Hobby Paint. I've laid out all the parts for a model here. This is a Revell car kit. It's an Aston Martin. Great looking kit. And the first thing you might notice is it's molded in color. This is an easy click kit, which means they want you to snap it all together and get it done fast, which is fine. But if you really want to take it to the next level, you want to paint it. And why do I want to paint it? Because plastic is plastic, and it looks like plastic. In other words, I can do the best job I can on this and build it, and to me, looking at it, I can still tell that it's not painted, that it's a plastic kit or a toy. So what I need to determine is, what colors do I need? What kind of paint am I going to use? And how to progress. So let's take a look at the different types of paint we can use. As you can see, there's a lot of different paints to choose from. I've purposely divided my paints into 2 sections here, or 2 segments. This side are paints that if you spray them, you need to take precautions. You need to wear a respirator, use a spray booth, ventilate, because they emit toxic fumes, and you don't want to breathe it if you spray them. Even if you're hand painting, you should wear something, because they do have fumes. This side are alcohol and water-based acrylics. These you should wear a mask, you should spray them in a booth, but they're less toxic than the solvent-based paints. That being said, which ones can I use for plastic modeling? You can use every single one of these. You just have to know how to thin them down to spray them. Even when you're brushing, you should thin them a little bit. But all these paints will work on plastic models. As far as thinners go, if you look next to them, there's a lot of different thinners here. Each thinner goes with one of these paints. In other words, this is real color thinner. This is real color paint. When I use real color, I use real color thinner. This is Tamiya's lacquer paint. When I spray that or use it, I use Tamiya's lacquer thinner. This is Humbrol. I use Humbrol thinner. Get where I'm going here? There's a pattern. This is Tamiya's acrylic or alcohol-based thinner. This goes with their alcohol-based paint. This is Revell's alcohol, or I should say water-based paint, alcohol-based paint. That goes with the Revell paint. This is AK's thinner, goes with the AK paint. Vallejo's water-based, use water. So my rule of thumb, whenever you choose a paint, buy the thinner from that manufacturer. Even if it's an alcohol-based paint and you say, I'll get a big bottle of alcohol, it'll last me forever. There are other chemicals in that paint that the manufacturer adds to help with drying time, with durability, and so forth. Even different alcohol-based paints, the thinners don't cross over. So be careful. Rule of thumb, always buy the thinner that goes with the paint. The question is always asked, which paint works the best? In other words, if I'm painting this car body, which one's going to be the best for it? As I said, you can use any of these paints as long as you do the prep work. And the most important piece of preparation is to prime the model. In other words, as you see here, I've got Tamiya primer in white and gray. I've got a can of Mr. Hobby primer. You need to give the surface of the model a tooth, which means a surface that the paint will stick to. If you look at a plastic model, you touch it, you feel it, it's really smooth and it's really slick. Enamel paints and lacquers may adhere to that. Not great, but they'll stick to it. Aqueous or water-based and alcohol-based paints, they're going to have a really hard time sticking to that smooth surface. They need a surface that has a grit to it, something to hold the paint. And the primers do just that. You spray a primer on, and even though it looks super smooth, it's a flat color, which means it's a granular surface. It's not reflecting light. So it's ready. You can spray your paint on it and it'll attach to that primer. So before you do anything, clean up your parts, whether you build it first or you paint the parts separately, prime the parts. I suggest white for lighter colors or bright colors like yellows and reds and things like that, because you want a nice bright surface to paint on so the color jumps out at you. Gray is great for military, like greens and browns and dark colors. So get yourself a can of primer, get your parts ready. Let's wrap up with a few hints and tips, things that I've learned along the way that might help you as a beginner. When you start out modeling and you get your paint, you're probably not going to have an airbrush. Spray painting is the best way to get a good finish on a surface like this. So what you're going to want to do is get yourself the colors you need, plus think about what's the overall color. Like on this car, it's silver. So if I can get myself a can of silver spray paint, like this one, this is Tamiya, and spray the body, I'll get a really great finish on it. And then I can use brush painting to do the detail work, interior, dashboard, things like that. But the overall appearance of the car is going to be dictated by that car body. So get yourself a can of spray paint, put it on gently, nice, even, and it'll look great. If you do brush, and let's say you're painting an airplane and you want to do camouflage, you're better to put a thinner coat of paint on and put multiple coats on so that it doesn't obscure detail on the model than to try to put a full coat of paint on right out of the jar. These paints are a little bit thick, right out of the can or right out of the jar. So what I do is I keep a shot glass, and it has to be glass, on my workbench, and I'll take my paint, pour a little bit in, then just a few drops of thinner, mix it in, get it to the point where it's kind of like 2% milk, a little bit thinner than full strength. Then you still need to prime. Always prime your parts because that gives it a good surface to adhere to. Then you can take that thin down paint and put multiple light coats on, let it dry, put another coat on, and it'll build up the color without obscuring all the detail on the model. So keep that in mind. Thin your paint down a little bit to brush paint. Get spray cans to do the overall. You can also buy paint sets, and this comes in handy for figures. Figure painting is usually done with water-based paint, like AKI, Vallejo. These are paints that you can thin with water, and thinning them with water gives you the ability to create glazes and do washes and things on a figure. So you can buy a set of flesh paints that has 5 or 6 colors in it with all the different shades for a flesh tone. You can buy sets for specific vehicles. This is for olive drab. See, it has a Sherman tank on it. But it gives you the base coat, the dark shade, the light shade, and so forth. And this is more when you're airbrushing and you're modulating colors. But there are sets out there that are specific to World War II German aircraft, 1939 to 41. You can buy the colors you need to paint your airplane all in one box, so keep that in mind. We'll go into more depth. We'll go more in depth on airbrushing and mixing colors and maybe even the chemistry of paint, but don't hold me to that in a later video or two. So stay tuned, keep modeling.